The air in the obsidian chamber hung thick with the metallic tang of fear. The Council of Xylar, their forms shimmering with iridescent energy, sat in a mosaic of worried contemplation. Light refracted erratically across the polished obsidian floor, distorting the reflections of their multifaceted eyes. The crisis, a shadow that had been slowly lengthening across the star charts for cycles, had finally solidified into an undeniable reality: humanity. The data streams, meticulously gathered over decades, painted a picture that was both baffling and terrifying. They were different. Unlike any species the Xylar had encountered in their eons of interstellar exploration and conquest. Their technology, while primitive in some aspects, possessed a terrifying adaptability, a relentless drive for innovation that left the Xylar scholars baffled. They had received the warning, the ancient proclamation of the Guardians etched in celestial fire, the universal law that the Xylar in their arrogance had long dismissed as irrelevant, a relic of a bygone era. Now, with the threat of humanity at the edge of their galactic dominion, the warning echoed with a horrifying prescience. The proclamation had been clear. They are born of fire and stardust. They will not forget those who ignore their warnings. Beware their vengeance. Xylar, the elder of the shifting sands, his form a swirling vortex of emerald and sapphire, was the first to break the silence. His voice, a resonant hum that vibrated through the chamber, carried the weight of 1,000 years and 1,000 conquered worlds. The scouting reports are unsettling. Their starships, while visually unimpressive, seem to possess an unnerving resilience. Their weapons defy established physics, and their motivations remain opaque. They have ignored our diplomatic overtures, our attempts at trade, our warnings. He paused, the multifaceted eyes of the other counselors reflecting his own unease. They seem to be expanding. He finished, the word hanging in the air like a shroud. A wave of agitation rippled through the council. Xythar, the strategist of the Crimson Fleet, his form a pillar of pulsating ruby light, bristled. They are trespassers, infringers on the Xylar Imperium. We have crushed species for lesser transgressions. Send the Crimson Fleet. Let them know the price of insolence. His voice was a crackle of barely contained energy, a reflection of the centuries he had spent perfecting the art of war, the cold calculation of conquest. Xylar sighed, the movement a slow, deliberate shifting of his shimmering form. Xythar, your eagerness to unleash destruction is predictable, but is it wise? We know nothing of their true power. We cannot gauge their resolve. To rush into conflict without understanding our opponent would be foolish. His gaze swept the council, assessing their reactions. He knew the warhawks, those who thrived on conflict, those who saw every new civilization as a threat to be eradicated. And he knew the pragmatists, those who sought to understand, to negotiate, to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. The silence returned, heavier now, burdened with the unspoken fears and anxieties that clawed at the core of every Xylar being. Fear, more than any other emotion, drove them. Fear of the unknown, fear of weakness, fear of their own impending obsolescence. They had built their empire on the foundation of conquest, on the subjugation of countless species. Now, faced with a civilization that defied their understanding, that seemed to operate according to a different set of rules, the fear was turning to paranoia. Xyren, the diplomat of the Azure Stream, a creature of ethereal grace, her form shimmering with 1,000 shades of blue, spoke softly. Perhaps diplomacy is still an option. We have not fully exhausted all avenues of communication. We could attempt a more persistent approach. A delegation, perhaps? The suggestion was met with a chorus of dissenting murmurs. Diplomacy had always been a secondary tactic for the Xylar, a tool to be used only when brute force was deemed impractical. They ignored the first overture, Xyren, Xythar countered, his voice dripping with disdain. What makes you think they will heed a second? They see our weakness, they perceive our hesitation. They will interpret such weakness as an invitation to expand further. They will take our territories, then they will come for us. A tense silence filled the chamber. The implications of Xythar's words were clear. The Xylar had built their empire on the strength of their military might. To be seen as weak, to show even the slightest hesitation, was to invite challenge, rebellion, and ultimately dissolution. But the data on humanity was, to put it mildly, unnerving. The whispers circulating amongst the scholars spoke of resilience that bordered on the impossible, of an almost spiritual connection to their technology, of a fury that was not easily provoked, but imposed. Sibyl to contain once unleashed. Xylar shifted his form, the colors within him swirling in a turbulent dance. He knew they were at a critical juncture. The fate of the Xylar Imperium rested on the decision they made in the coming cycles. To strike preemptively, risking a war they might not win. To attempt diplomacy, risking humiliation and a further erosion of their perceived strength. or to do nothing and watch as humanity continued its relentless expansion, a cancer at the edge of their domain. "We must gather more information," he declared, his voice firm despite the turmoil within him. "We must understand them. Before we choose our path, we must know the enemy we face." The council, with varying degrees of resentment, acquiesced. The obsidian chamber, once a symbol of the Xyler's absolute power, became a hive of frantic activity. The greatest minds of the Imperium were brought together, scholars, strategists, diplomats, all tasked with unraveling the enigma that was humanity. The data streams were reanalyzed, the scant communications decoded, the physical characteristics of human ships scrutinized with microscopic precision. But the more the Xyler learned, the less they understood. They found themselves staring into a void, a reflection of their own confusion. The humans were an enigma. Across the vast gulf of space, in the solitude of the void, a human vessel, the Dauntless, sliced through the cosmos, its sleek hull reflecting the distant starlight. Inside the ship's command center, a woman named Captain Eva Rostova stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse of stars. Beside her, Commander Jian Li, a man whose calm demeanor belied his sharp tactical mind, monitored the sensor readings. "Anything, Commander?" Eva asked, her voice calm and steady. "Readings remain stable, Captain," Jian replied, his eyes scanning the holographic displays. "No hostile activity detected. The Xyler continue to be passive." Eva's brow furrowed slightly. The Xyler, the dominant species in this sector of space, had been observing them for a while now. They had made several attempts to communicate, using a series of increasingly complex signals, but the humans had remained silent, choosing instead to meticulously analyze the alien communications, the alien ships, the alien culture, all while maintaining a steady course, expanding their territory as if the galaxy was theirs. There had been a general consensus among the humans, one that was unspoken yet clear. The Xyler's initial reaction was a test of human resolve, of human strength, of the human capacity for restraint. To engage in open warfare to show their hand too early would be a mistake. To cower would be a bigger mistake. The Dauntless was one of the first human vessels to explore this sector of space, and it carried a heavy responsibility. The fate of humanity's expansion into the galaxy, the survival of the human race itself, depended on their actions. The early stages were always the most dangerous. The humans had learned the hard way that there were things in the universe that even their most advanced technology couldn't understand and could definitely not control. They had also learned the best way to handle any hostile encounter. Do not engage until you understand your opponent. "Captain," a voice broke the silence. It was Lieutenant Commander Anya Petrova, the ship's xenolinguist, her tone betraying a hint of excitement. "I believe I have deciphered another message from the Xyler. It appears to be an invitation to parley." Eva turned to Anya, her expression thoughtful. "A formal invitation." "Yes, Captain, they are requesting a meeting. They have specified a location, coordinates that correspond to the central system of the Xyler Imperium. They are ready to answer our questions." Eva exchanged a glance with Jian. The invitation was unexpected, and it presented a dilemma. To accept would mean exposing themselves to the unknown, entering the heart of the Xyler's domain and trusting them. To refuse would be to prolong the current stalemate, to risk the Xyler taking a more aggressive stance, something that the human fleet was not prepared for. After a moment of consideration, Eva made her decision. "Inform the Admiralty. Prepare the Dauntless for interstellar travel." "We accept their invitation. But Commander Li, ensure that we are ready for any contingency." "Aye, Captain," Jian replied, his eyes filled with a steely resolve. The humans were not afraid of the Xyler, but they were certainly not reckless. They had seen too much in their journey across the stars to believe in naive notions of diplomacy or peace. They knew that in the grand tapestry of the cosmos, survival was earned, not given. As the Dauntless prepared to jump to hyperspace, a sense of tension filled the ship. The crew knew that they were walking into the unknown, venturing into a system controlled by a species that was both powerful and enigmatic. But they also knew that they were humanity's representatives, and they would act accordingly. They would be calm, they would be logical, and they would be ready. When the Dauntless arrived at the Xyler Central System, they were met by a fleet, but they did not interpret it as a threat. The vessels were positioned in a defensive formation, but they did not approach in an aggressive manner. The flagship of the Xyler fleet, a colossal vessel that dwarfed the Dauntless, sent a message, an offer of safe passage, and a signal to dock. Eva made the call. The humans followed the instructions. Inside the obsidian chamber, the Council of Xylar observed the approach of the human vessel with a mixture of apprehension and morbid fascination. All their calculations, their observations, their assumptions had led them to this moment. They had prepared for war, for diplomacy, for a stalemate, but they were not sure what to expect of the humans when the Dauntless docked and the humans stepped forth. As the docking clamps hissed and the airlock sealed, R turned to his fellow counselors. "Let us observe and let us learn," he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. The airlock opened and a delegation of humans emerged. They were a diverse group representing a spectrum of physical characteristics. There was Captain Rostova, her eyes calm and unwavering, her posture relaxed but alert. There was Commander Lee, his face a mask of serene composure, his every movement radiating a quiet authority. There were the diplomats, the scientists, and the military personnel. All of them, even the soldiers, seemed to carry themselves with an air of professional efficiency, of quiet confidence. They did not bow, they did not cower. They simply stood, surveying the room with an unnerving calm. It was a level of composure that the Xylar, with their innate anxieties and paranoia, found both perplexing and disturbing. Eva Rostova, with a small, almost imperceptible nod, addressed the council. "We are representatives of the Terran Federation. We have come to answer your invitation. We are here to learn, and we are here to observe." Her voice, surprisingly, resonated with a clarity that seemed to cut through the tension. Xylar, after a brief pause, responded. "Welcome, representatives of the Terran Federation. We are the Council of Xylar. We have extended this invitation in the hope of mutual understanding." The Council and the humans engaged in a dialogue of exploration. The humans were asked about their origins, their technology, their goals. The Xylar shared the knowledge they had of the universe, their history, their views on galactic order, and their understanding of war. The conversation between the humans and the Xylar slowly began to chip away at the walls of fear and mistrust that had separated the two species. They shared the philosophy of their cultures and the reason behind their motivations. The humans revealed subtly the principles that governed their society, a belief in cooperation, a respect for individual rights, and a commitment to peaceful exploration. They spoke of their journey across the stars, of the challenges they had faced, of the lessons they had learned. The Xylar in turn described their own history, their rise to power, and their own, albeit more brutal, quest for order. The humans also chose this opportunity to share the information about the proclamation of the Guardians, the message that the Xylar had ignored. The humans understood the importance of respect for the rules that govern the galaxy. The humans revealed that they were not like the other species that the Xylar had encountered. The more the humans talked, the more the Xylar began to understand. The humans were not a threat. They were explorers, they were builders. They were not driven by conquest, but by a curiosity and a desire to see what was out there. The Xylar were in awe. The humans had many of the same qualities, but their approach was very different. They were logical, they were calm, they were ethical, they were also powerful, very powerful. It was during these exchanges that the humans revealed their knowledge of the Xylar's technological weaknesses. They showed data on their systems that revealed that the Xylar were technologically stagnant. The Xylar's sensors had not detected this. The humans had not engaged with any technology that would be considered a sign of conflict. It was during these discussions that the humans made their most significant offer. "We have been monitoring your technological capabilities for quite some time now," Eva stated, her voice devoid of any arrogance. "We have noticed some vulnerabilities, and we believe we can help." The Council, initially skeptical, was quickly overwhelmed by the revelation. The humans, with their advanced understanding of energy manipulation, their mastery of materials science, and their innovative approach to weapons technology, revealed that the Xylar's defenses were centuries out of date. Humans were offering to share their knowledge, to bring the Xylar Imperium up to speed with the latest advancements. It was an unprecedented offer, one that the Xylar had never received from any other species. Xylar hesitated. He saw the danger in this offer. If the Xylar accepted, they would be dependent on the humans. They would lose a measure of their autonomy. But if they refused, the humans would continue to advance, and the Xylar would fall further behind. The Xylar knew that they were in a race against time, with the humans as their only ally. "Why?" Xylar asked, his voice a low hum. "Why offer such assistance? You have everything to gain and nothing to lose. What is your goal?" Eva smiled, a small, almost undetectable curve of her lips. "We seek understanding. We believe that cooperation, not conflict, is the path to long-term prosperity. We believe that we can build a better galaxy together, one where different species can coexist, where technology can be used for the benefit of all. She paused, her gaze sweeping the council. We believe in humanity. The council was stunned into silence. It was a philosophy that the Xylar found both alien and alluring. They had always believed in power, in control, in the subjugation of the weak. The humans were offering them a different path, a path that led to unity, to cooperation, to mutual growth. After much deliberation, the Council of Xylar made their decision. They accepted the human offer. They would open their doors to human technology, and they would begin a new era of cooperation. They would work together with humanity, not as adversaries, but as allies. It was a profound shift in the history of the Xylar Imperium, a turning point that would reshape their destiny. They had decided to respect the warning and seek unity. The alliance was sealed. But even as the Xylar and the humans began to work together, a new danger emerged, a threat that was far greater than either of them had anticipated. During the exchange of knowledge, the human sensors picked up an anomaly, a signal that was emanating from the outer reaches of the galaxy, a signal they had been monitoring since their early exploration days. The signal was ancient, predating any known civilization, and it was getting closer. The signal was encoded. The humans worked with the Xylar to decrypt it, their combined knowledge of science and technology enabling them to finally break through the layers of the signal. The information that was contained within the signal was even more frightening than the anomaly itself. It was a warning from the Guardians, the cosmic beings that had seeded the galaxy with life, the same beings that had sent the proclamation of the Guardians that the Xylar had ignored. The message described a threat, a cosmic entity that consumed galaxies, an entity of immense power and malevolent intent. The entity, known only as the Devourer, was rapidly approaching the galaxy. The Guardians, facing the entity, had made a decision. They sent the signal in the hope that another civilization, a different civilization, would understand their warning and prepare for the coming conflict. The message went on to outline the defenses that had been set up, the strategies that had been developed, and the weapons that had been created. The Guardians had built a network of ancient structures, megastructures, designed to contain the Devourer. But the structures were failing. The Devourer was almost here. The humans, upon seeing this information, knew that the galaxy was on the brink of destruction. They contacted their home and brought in their best scientists, their best strategists, and all their resources. The Xylar did the same. The humans and the Xylar pooled their resources, their knowledge, and their resolve. A new alliance was formed, a coalition of two species facing a cosmic enemy of unimaginable power. The Dauntless became the epicenter of a new strategy, a plan of action that would save the galaxy. Eva and Jayan worked with the Council of Xylar, exchanging ideas, debating strategies, and coordinating their efforts. They needed to find the key to the Guardians' defenses to understand how to stop the Devourer. They had learned that the Guardians had relied on cooperation to survive, and now it was the best, maybe the only, hope to overcome this threat. The task ahead was enormous, but the humans and the Xylar, bound together by their shared fear and determination, were not deterred. They set out to prepare for the inevitable arrival of the Devourer. The humans and the Xylar began working together, combining their expertise to repair the Guardian megastructures, to develop new weapons, and to construct a defensive fleet. They scoured the galaxy for allies, hoping to convince other species to join their cause. The warning had been ignored. The humans would not repeat the same mistake. They also knew that humanity was the key to this battle. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the pressure mounted. The Devourer's advance accelerated. The Xylar began to show signs of internal conflict. Some of the counselors still clung to their old ways, to their lust for power, and they struggled with the changes that the alliance with humanity had brought. But despite the turmoil, the humans and the Xylar stood united. Finally, the day arrived. The Devourer appeared, its form a swirling vortex of cosmic energy, a terrifying spectacle of destruction that could consume entire star systems. The initial assault by the Devourer was devastating. The human and Xylar fleets fought with the combined strength, the best technology, and the finest soldiers in the galaxy. But the Devourer was too powerful. The human and the Xylar ships fought valiantly, sacrificing themselves to buy time for the megastructures to be reactivated, for the new weapons to be deployed. The humans and the Xylar, working together, were able to contain the Devourer, to temporarily push it back. They knew that time was running out. Eva found herself giving the orders, her voice clear and calm. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no room for hesitation. "All hands," she announced over the ship's comms, her voice projecting through every vessel. "This is Captain Rostova. We are the last line of defense. We will give everything we have." The final moments of the battle saw the humans and the Xylar launch a desperate counterattack, using all of the weapons, all of the megastructures, all of the ingenuity that they had put into place. In the heart of the chaos, Eva sent out one final command. "For humanity, for the Xylar, for the galaxy, give them hell." The combined assault crippled the Devourer, but the entity was not destroyed. With a final, earth-shattering roar, the Devourer unleashed a wave of energy, a blast of cosmic fury that struck the megastructures, causing them to collapse, to crumble, to fall into the blackness of space. In the final moments of the battle, as the megastructures collapsed, and the last of the human and the Xylar ships were falling, Eva made a fateful choice. Recognizing that the only chance of stopping the Devourer was a final, desperate act, she ordered the Dauntless to initiate a self-destruct sequence, using the ship's warp core as a weapon. "Commander Lee," she said, her voice strained, "activate the core, we must do everything." "Acknowledged, Captain," Jayan replied, his voice calm but filled with the weight of the moment. He moved to the console and began entering the launch sequence. The crew of the Dauntless knew that this was the end, but they were ready to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the galaxy. As the warp core began to overload, the Dauntless flew straight into the heart of the Devourer. The ensuing explosion was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The explosion, the blast of energy, obliterated the Devourer. With its final, earth-shattering scream, the entity was gone and the galaxy was safe. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of survivors. The ships that had miraculously survived the battle pulled themselves together, regrouped, and surveyed the wreckage of the battle. The galaxy was scarred, but it was safe. The humans had made the sacrifice. After the dust settled, the Xylar grieved for their fallen allies. They knew that their victory had come at a great cost. They had lost the Dauntless. They had lost Eva Rostova, Jayan Lee, and the crew. They had lost their allies. The Xylar realized that the humans had been warning them all along, but the Xylar had been too arrogant, too blinded by their own power to listen. Now they had to rebuild. They had to honor the sacrifice of the humans. As the Xylar and the survivors began to pick up the pieces, they received another message from the Guardians, a message that confirmed what Eva and Jayan and the crew of the Dauntless had done. The Guardians had built the megastructures with the hope that life could survive the Devourer. They had predicted that the Devourer would never be destroyed. The Guardians' warning contained one last piece of information. The megastructures were not designed to simply contain the Devourer. They were designed to contain a much bigger threat. "This entity, the Devourer, was a distraction," said Xylar, the elder of the Shifting Sands. The Council was in a state of shock, the devastation of the Devourer still fresh in their minds. "The Devourer was created to protect the galaxy from a bigger threat, an entity of pure destruction, a weapon of cosmic scale," Xylar said. The humans had warned them. The humans had understood. Now the Xylar had to prepare. The proclamation had been right. The humans had done everything. Now the Xylar had to do the rest. They looked at the empty void where the Dauntless had met its fate, and they knew they would have to honor the sacrifice of the humans. They would rebuild their civilization. They would preserve the memory of the humans, and they would continue the fight, and they would do so without fear. They would do it in the name of humanity, and they would keep the promise that had been made. The Xylar understood that they had been blind. They realized that the humans had ignored the warning. The humans were not a threat. They were the future. They were the hope. And now the Xylar were ready to face whatever came next. The Xylar gathered together to see the galaxy anew. The humans had helped them. The humans had trusted them. The humans had given them the greatest gift of all, the hope for the future. The proclamation of the Guardians echoed in the hearts of the Xylar, and they knew that the humans would not be forgotten. The humans had fought with them and died for them. The Xylar would build a new galaxy, a galaxy worthy of the sacrifice, a galaxy worthy of humanity. They looked towards the stars, and they saw a new dawn.